You are listening to Rewritten Fates, a dark fantasy romance series. Book 1, I Woke Up as the Duke's Condemned Duchess. Chapter 3, The Saintess's Blessing. The great chapel fell into a deafening absolute silence. Lyra moved toward us with a rhythmic, ethereal grace, her footsteps barely audible against the polished marble floor. It was astonishing, disturbing even, how quickly the atmosphere in the room shifted. Only seconds ago, the air had been thick with the acidic scent of judgment and the frantic buzzing of gossip. Now, every noble stood perfectly still, their spines straightened in reverence. The Saintess of Light had that effect on people. She turned a room of vipers into a flock of sheep. Faith, I realized, was the most powerful weapon in this world. Lyra stopped a few paces away, folding her hands together with a practiced elegance. Up close, her beauty felt almost supernatural, like a painting brought to life. Golden hair framed her face like spun sunlight, and her pale blue robes shimmered with every movement, silver threads catching the candlelight like fallen stars. And her eyes? They were impossibly kind. It was the sort of radiant kindness that compelled people to confess their darkest sins, or made them believe they were guilty of sins they hadn't even committed. "Your Majesty?" she said, her voice a soft melodic chime as she bowed toward the king. The king inclined his head, his hard expression softening. "Saintess Lyra, you honor us with your presence." Her gaze shifted to Alaric. "Your Grace," she continued, her tone laced with a gentle warmth. "Congratulations on your marriage." Alaric's expression remained carved from granite. Saintess. It was a greeting that was simple, polite, and surgically distant. Finally, Lyra turned her attention to me. Her smile widened, warming her features, but the very moment her eyes locked onto mine, something shifted. A cold, sharp flicker of recognition flashed behind the blue, gone in a heartbeat, but unmistakable. She knew something was different. "Duchess Elara," she said, her voice like the pealing of soft bells. "I must admit, I was deeply worried about you." I tilted my head slightly, keeping my expression a mask of aristocratic calm. "Worried? Whatever for?" "Yes," she replied, her eyes never wavering. "After everything that happened, I feared you might not possess the strength to survive the night." A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs passed through the pews. It was a master stroke of manipulation. She was playing the role of the concerned friend while simultaneously reminding every witness of my crimes. It was subtle. It was devastatingly effective. "I'm far more resilient than people expect, Saintess," I said, my voice steady and cool. For a fraction of a second, her gaze sharpened into a blade. Then, just as quickly, the radiant smile returned. "I'm truly glad to hear it." She clapped her hands softly, a signal for a young acolyte to step forward. The girl carried a small silver bowl filled with water that shimmered with an unnatural pearlescent glow beneath the chandeliers. Holy water. Of course. Lyra lifted the bowl with trembling, pious grace. "As Saintess, it is my sacred duty to bless new unions," she explained sweetly, her eyes fixed on mine. "And after recent events, I thought it would be especially appropriate to ensure this marriage begins with a pure spirit." The court leaned forward as one. Everyone in this room understood the subtext. This wasn't a blessing. It was a test. In this world, holy water reacted violently to the presence of dark magic or a corrupted soul. If the villainess had truly committed the horrors she was accused of, the blessing would expose her in a burst of divine agony. Lyra extended the bowl toward me. "Please," she whispered, "drink." For a long moment, I didn't move. In the original novel, the real Elara had refused, her guilt making her recoil in fear. The court had gasped, and the Saintess had declared her refusal as final proof of her treachery. The execution had followed 48 hours later. But I wasn't that Elara, and I refused to play a role that ended in ashes. I reached out and took the bowl. The metal was ice cold against my skin. I could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing into me, waiting for the scream, waiting for the smoke, waiting for the monster to be revealed. I raised the silver rim to my lips, and I drank. The water was freezing, sliding down my throat like liquid glass. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then heat exploded in the center of my chest. It spread through my veins like wildfire, a searing, white-hot agony that made my vision blur. Pain flared across the mark of the betrayer on my collarbone, feeling as though a brand were being pressed into my flesh. I clenched my teeth so hard, I thought they might shatter. I didn't scream. I didn't flinch. I refused to give them the satisfaction of my suffering. Slowly, the burning sensation began to recede, leaving behind a dull, thrumming ache. I lowered the bowl with a steady hand and passed it back to the servant. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely more than a breath, but perfectly polite. A heavy silence fell across the chapel. Confused whispers began to bleed through the rows of nobles. Nothing had happened. There was no divine fire, no black smoke. Lyra blinked, just once. Her smile faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching before she regained control. "Interesting," she murmured, her gaze dropping briefly to the neckline of my dress where the mark of the betrayer had dimmed to a faint, bruised purple. When her eyes lifted back to mine, she wasn't looking at a villainess anymore. She was studying an enigma. She stepped closer, moving into my personal space until only I could hear the low, dangerous honey of her voice. "You feel different," she whispered. My pulse quickened, hammering against the pain in my chest. I met her gaze head on. "Perhaps prison changed me, Saintess. It has a way of stripping away everything but the essentials." For a moment, she simply watched me, her blue eyes searching for the woman she had destroyed. Then she smiled again, radiant, perfect, and utterly convincing to everyone but me. "Perhaps," she said softly, but the warmth in her eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating light. Lyra stepped back, addressing the court with a flourish of her robes. "Well, it seems the Duchess is perfectly healthy and her spirit remains intact." The nobles relaxed, the tension in the room evaporating as they accepted her word as law. But as I turned, I noticed Alaric. He was watching me with those molten gold eyes, narrowed in deep suspicion. He was thoughtful, as if he had just realized the puzzle pieces he had been given no longer fit the picture. The Saintess was still smiling, but I could see the truth now. She wasn't relieved that I had survived her test. She was curious. And in a story like this, the curiosity of a heroine was far more dangerous than the hatred of a villain. But in the royal court, nothing is ever truly over. Secrets move in the shadows, and every choice rewrites fate. Continue the story in the next episode of Rewritten Fates, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.